because you have to find the right problem, and then you have to find a problem that has a viable business model around it with the solution you come up with. People always have an idea, and that idea is 99% of the time wrong to some degree. It might be completely wrong. It might be wrong around the details, but they're generally shooting in the right direction. I talked about the 4 areas of product risk, and just to go over them again, there's the value risk, there's a usability risk, there's a feasibility risk, and the viability risk.
Jehan Gonsal is the principal product manager at Atlassian, and in our today's podcast, we will be exploring the product market fit. We will be discussing with Jehan how to explore product market fit, how to talk to customers, or should we be talking to focus groups for finding the product market fit? What if the idea gets stolen during the product market fit exploration? And how to pivot if no market fit found for the product? Hey guys, welcome to Better Engineering and Management Podcast. Today we have Jehan joining us to discuss with us how can companies, organizations find the product market fit for the product they are planning to spend their money on. Jehan, please welcome to the podcast.
Howdy, Deep. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Jehan, please give us a small introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Jehan. I'm Australian with Sri Lankan background, but I'm Australian, based in Sydney. I'm a product manager. I work at Atlassian. My career, just a quick highlight, is I initially finished university and wanted to be a musician and an English teacher, so I did that for a few years. Went back to uni and ended up becoming a data scientist and data analyst for a few years. And then I ended up falling into product management in a very strange way. I had a team where a team was spun down when the project ended, basically, and they said, "Oh, would you like to become a product manager?" And I said, "Well, that sounds awesome. I'd love to." And also, what is a product manager? And in the last 5 years, I think saying yes to that has changed my life pretty substantially because, I'm all about product these days, working at Atlassian.
Sure. That's an amazing story, Jehan. I mean, kind of very inspiring in a way. So, Jehan, coming back to our topic, one of the age-old problems with all companies, right, whether it be startups or it be like bigger organizations, is to determine the product market fit, right? Whether there is a market for the product they are planning to spend their money on, right? Because if they spend a lot of money and create a product and there is no market for that product, all that money is in a way sunk cost, right? It's a wasted money, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you suggest that this exploration can be done to find if there is a product, if there is a market for the product you're working on in a systematic manner?
Yeah. I mean, look, the word there that caused my spidey senses to kind of tingle a bit was the word systematic, because the challenge is that it's not ever perfectly systematic. You can make it more systematic. You can make it a bit more intentional. You can be a bit more deliberate about what you're trying to do and why you're going through each step in a process. But sometimes every framework or approach to product market fit that I've found, at a certain point where they try to say, okay, here's what we want to do, here's the process, follow the process, here are the steps. People then start following the steps and they forget the whole reason why they're doing it in the first place, and then it all falls flat. So that's the first thing I'd say. So to some degree, you have to accept that it is a little bit chaotic. And product market fit can vary in its difficulty. So if you're working in a really large enterprise company where you have a product that is quite mature and you're looking to build a feature and you want to make sure that feature itself has product market fit, but you have a very healthy user base, this is a very clear thing that you should be doing, it's kind of a no-brainer, then product market fit is much more a science or even just a process than it is an art. Whereas on the other hand, if you're looking for something in a much more exploratory area where you have less knowledge, in general, it's completely new, you're working with new technologies, all of these things add a lot of complexity. And in those cases there, what you're looking at is much, much more difficult. And so the process you'll take in both cases may be somewhat similar, but you will find that you will hit way more problems in that second example than you would the first. So I definitely found working as a product manager, the first few problems I worked on were probably a lot simpler in terms of product market fit. It was more, how do we solve this? How do we make sure this works? How do we make sure we don't build something super expensive or unusable or whatever? Whereas now I'm definitely moving more into that area where it's like, okay, is there a market for this? Although I have done that a few times over my career. So I guess I'll walk you through then, first of all, to give this some structure. Here are
Sure.
the things that you would do to try and find product market fit. And a lot of these things you could find quite easily doing a bit of Google searching. There's lots of books on it. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here, but what I will focus on is where people might fall flat or find things difficult, because it's very easy to read about a process and then you try and do it, then you realize, oh, wow, this is why people get paid money to do this. It's not super easy. You can't just automate it away. So the general way you want to do it is you want to try and talk to customers first. So I always recommend talking to customers. I mean, look, I'm a data scientist by training. I love looking at data, and there's a place for that. And if you can find access to survey data or user data on either competitor products or your own products, that stuff's great. But talking to customers is something that should always be, the top of your list when it comes to priorities for product market fit. If you don't understand what your users are doing and what their problems are, then you aren't really in a position to really convincingly speak to it or come up with ideas that are going to have that level of fit. But then the first problem people come up with that is they talk to people and people tell them what they want, and then they say, we're going to build this thing that person told us to build. And that's obviously a bit of a product 101 mistake, which is you shouldn't be listening to what people tell you what they want, because go to any of your friends and ask them what they would like in a partner, and then go see them 10 or 20 years down the line and see who they end up being with. It'll be nothing like the fantasy they had in their imagination. That's because when they started lifting off all the things they want in a partner, they're not prioritizing in any way. They're not saying, I really want to make sure that they are like reliable and that they have a really deep connection to me and we have shared values. They'll kind of talk about all the stuff they want, and there's no real sense of, well, actually, this is what matters. That would be nice, but honestly, I don't care. So understand where there's unmet needs rather than the things that they say they want. So if they say they want something like, okay, maybe someone's working with Excel and they say, look, when we work with Excel, we find VBA really difficult. So we'd love something that helps us write better VBA, because we find it really confusing. And then when we have new people work with us, they don't understand the code. Now, if you went and built that or built functions in Excel to help them skip the VBA, you'd probably miss the point, because in many cases, people are using VBA because they're using Excel when they shouldn't be using Excel. And what they really need is a database. And so the better solution there would be to say, okay, people are struggling with managing their data. Who cares about Excel? Excel's got very little to do with it. They need a way for them to create better databases, but they don't have any training in SQL or data engineering or anything like that. So a solution might be, okay, we've got an AI-based product where we have an LLM that interfaces with the SQL database, where you just say in human language what you want, and it will just do it for you. And that might be, these days,
the best solution.
Yeah, a much better solution. And Databricks are already doing that kind of thing now. I'm not talking about anything particularly revolutionary right now, but that's what we're talking about. So make sure you're listening to their problems, their unmet needs, and you're finding problems where they really, really struggle and they would pay top dollar for you to fix it. So if you tell them, hey, I can solve this problem for you, would you give me an hour of your time next week? And they say, look, I'm busy and I don't really care. It's probably not a problem worth solving. There needs to be a certain level of appetite. So that's the first part. But then after that, what you need to do is you need to work. And in my experience working at reasonably large companies, I'll work with designers and engineers. And what we're trying to do once we've figured out the problem we want to solve is, how do we make sure that we find a solution that actually solves that problem and gets all the key valuable parts of that problem solved? Because sometimes that problem they give you is, it might as well be like, can you create my own internet for me? That's not going to happen. But there might be some small part of that is really, really important. So you want to make sure you really hone in on that. The other problem is, how do you make sure it's usable? So you might find a solution, it's super cool, super elegant, super scalable, but only 5% of people can figure it out, and those people could pretty much build it themselves. So you've pretty much completely stuffed up the usability side of it. Then the other problem then is feasibility. So you want to make sure that you can actually build it in a reasonable period of time. And then the last thing is viability, which could be stuff like not cannibalizing your internal products if you're a large company, or just not breaking the law, not doing stuff that's morally questionable. And where people get stuck here is they sometimes go through a bit of a waterfall process. So waterfall discovery, where you say, okay, here's some designs, and then here's the requirements, here's the designs, here's the estimates, now here's the project plan. And that to me is the worst way to do it, because what you've basically done is you've assumed that the designer knows feasibility, which they pretty much never do. You've assumed that the product manager knows usability. You basically just never got everyone in a room. So what you want to do is really just go through as many iterations as you can, where you try and fully solve the problem as a team, all of you together. And the more of those iterations you can go through, the closer you'll get to a solution that's about right. And at that point, you'll probably have something close to product market fit. That's my big rant about, that's me just giving it all in one go, but happy to dive in 20 parts of that if you'd like.
So that's very interesting, because so what I understood is like, when you want to find a product market fit, the first thing is you can go to the customers, you can ask them what their problems are, but then you have to be very careful, because they may say a lot of problems, but those problems may not necessarily translate into good product ideas, because what you have to understand is not the solutions they are suggesting, hey, I want this, but their pain problems. You understand what they're going through, where they are getting stuck, and then you kind of address those pain problems and come up with product ideas all by yourself, because they may not be in the position where they can imagine what kind of product will actually solve their problems. Very interesting. And then you also mentioned that, of course, after doing this, you have to find out whether the product that you are going to build is feasible. That is, again, the cost picture. If you build something which is like the return on investment is not correct, ROI is not there on that product, you are spending way too much to build a product, but and when you are going to sell it, you will not get that particular returns, then again there is no point building that product. And the last thing I think you mentioned is viability, that you shouldn't end up cannibalizing your own products or some other features from some. Let's say you have a big product which is selling really good, and you build a small product which starts cannibalizing this big product. It may kind of become counterproductive, right? The whole exercise of finding the product market fit, because you found the correct product, but probably at the cost of another product which was a hit for you already.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, you're solving the problem that
interesting.
people don't want to pay for your expensive products. You will build them a cheaper one where they can save money, which is not good for your business. And I think one thing that's important there is, at any point in time in this whole process, you could find that you need to go back to the drawing board. You might find a problem that is really difficult for people, where they have an unmet need. So if you can solve that for them, it would be highly valuable. And then you come up with a way that you could solve it. And then you realize, from a technology perspective, there's just no way to do this. Or there is no way where you can make the unit economics work, where it'll always cost like $10 a user per day at the cheapest, no matter what you do. And people aren't willing to spend more than $10 a month.
Right.
You're out of luck. That's just not going to work. So either you find a different solution for it, or maybe this is the reason why there is no product, in which case you're in trouble. So that's why I say product market fit is hard, because you have to find the right problem, and then you have to find a problem that has a viable business model around it with the solution you come up with. And that's where things can get pretty hard.
Okay, I can start imagining already the difficulties surrounding this exploration, because first of all, you have to go to the customer, make all this communication, and then at the end of the day, you may realize that even though you have found a product market fit, the business doesn't really is not going to support it, because numbers will not kind of justify all this effort. That's very interesting.
Well, that's an interesting thing you mentioned, though, as well, because if you think it's a really good opportunity, but the business doesn't, because they don't think that it's financially viable for the business, well, I mean, you've just defined product market fit poorly. You've just basically said product market fit is a product that solves a problem I like, that I think is good, but actually doesn't make money for the. I mean, it's product market fit, not problem solution fit, which is just solving a problem, making sure it works. And if you can't show really strong evidence, and this is where things get really hard, especially in enterprise organizations, convincing people that the big idea that you have is the right one is a difficult endeavor. It gets messy. There's lots of conversations that go in circles. You have to be more. It's not about being a perfect communicator where everyone just loves it. It's about being resilient and knowing that you'll have a bunch of people say no before you get a yes at the end, and you have to be okay with that. But then you also have to work really, really hard. Anyway, I can get into that in a bit.
Sure. So, Jehan, one more thing that we discussed, right? You also touched upon this, like larger enterprises have different kind of resources available to them and different kind of problems, right? So I wanted to kind of discuss that a little bit more. So when doing this product market fit, right, when you are on that exploration, what are the major differences that you will observe between enterprises, which are large enterprises, and startups? How, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, to a certain degree, I mean, there's a few variables here that matter.
Hmm.
So I've not really worked in startups as such, but I did work at Melbourne Uni, and Melbourne University is not a startup, but I worked in a small area of Melbourne University where they kind of had a bit of a incubator going on where we wanted to find a market for leadership coaching, not a digital product. This is just doing leadership training for the department or the Center for Workplace Leadership. And there was a process for us to figure out what is the best place for us to invest for us to deliver some kind of leadership training. Who should we target? Whereas right now I work on Jira Service Management, and we're talking about how we can better serve HR teams. And we already have other products in our suite that can work for HR teams in different ways and in different ways, shapes, and forms. There's so many different products going on with so many different markets. It can be a bit more intricate, but ultimately, there's a few things that will always be there. The first thing, and this is the most important thing, are the preconceptions that everyone has around where the opportunities are and what the solution should roughly look like. It's pretty much never the case unless you're a founder that someone will say, hey, I want you to solve a problem in this area, and I have no idea what it is. People always have an idea. And that idea is 99% of the time wrong to some degree. It might be completely wrong. It might be wrong around the details, but they're generally shooting in the right direction. So with working at Melbourne Uni, the problem was they thought all the money was with executive education. They're saying, okay, we're a university, we can teach CEOs about leadership. But then we spoke to a few people in that area, and it turns out there's a few people that do that in our country, and they are all the people that get to do that. Everyone else is trying to get in there, but there's only about 10 or 20 people that really do leadership training, and they have a very strong reputation. It's all word of mouth. We either try and get into a market that won't let us in, or we try and hire these people. We have zero leverage. They could basically leave at any time and take all our clients with them. So it makes no sense. So there's that conversation of saying, hey, I know you think this is the idea, but this is actually not a good idea, and we have to convince you of that. The other side is then the tech side, where if you're working at a tech company like Atlassian, most people are pretty tech savvy, but you get different people with different backgrounds. You work with PMs who are more or less technical, designers tend to be less technical, engineers tend to be very technical, and they all have gaps in their knowledge. So that's another place where people say, oh, but this should be cheap. All you have to do is build a page. You're like, yes, but it's a page that has additional front end, back end, there's platform components. It's actually, 3 years for 2 teams, literally multiple millions of dollars, even though you think it's just a page. That's another area where if people are more technically fluent and they understand that stuff, their expectations can be easier to shift, or they'll be better aligned with you. And then the last thing is, yes, the complexity of your business model. So that also plays in, and that just comparing, something like Atlassian to where I worked before, which was a Quantium, to then, market research places where I worked before, very different dynamics there. So I think those are the 3 big things. And then the size, but I'll leave that. I think that's less important than the other 3.
Understood. Pretty much there are kind of, as you mentioned, there are a lot of variables that play here when you are kind of doing this exploration between startups and enterprises. And both of them have some advantages and some disadvantages also. So you have to play your strengths if you are in a startup, if you're going for this product market fit, whereas in enterprise, right, bigger enterprises, one of the key things is that there will be many people whom you will have to convince, I guess. And, even if you have found the product market fit, how to convince them that your big idea is good idea can be very challenging. And as you also mentioned, right, most of the times people have this feeling in their mind that their idea is good, but because they have not gone into the details. So on that, it looks kind of attractive, but probably when you go into the details, the devil will be out there. Okay, so interesting. Jehan, the other question I would like to ask is like, what happens oftentimes also is you are in an exploratory mode, but you also start the development of the product, right? Because you have some ideas, some inkling that, hey, this is what we want to build.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, my question is like, how can all these founders ensure that they don't go over budget when they are still in the exploration phase, and the fit of their product has still not been proven.
I mean, I talked about the 4 areas of product risk, and just to go over them again, there's the value risk, there's a usability risk, there's a feasibility risk, and the viability risk. And you need to be very cognizant of where you are with those. And you almost think of it like I said, I've got a data scientist background, so I always think about the world in terms of mathematical optimizations. You're trying to optimize return on investment on your engineering spend, and you're trying to figure out, is there a place here where we can make the kinds of returns that we want? So in some cases, you might say, all right, we want to fly to Mars, in a couple of years. We've got $2 million. Let's start building the rocket now, and then we'll figure the rest out later. That's obviously stupid because you'll never be able to build a full rocket for $2 million. That's insane. And we all know that. On the other side, it could be, hey, we have this idea for a web page, cool, but we don't quite know the exact content we want. We know we're going to have a few sections, and we kind of know the look and feel, but we don't know which image to put here. We don't know. Just build the site, get the front end framework in place, make it flexible enough so you can change it, and then you can just go in and change the strings. That's easy. So you kind of need to find the balance where you say, okay, what are we 80 to 90% confident on, or even higher percent on? And then what are the areas where we're not so confident, and how impactful could those be? If we're wrong about this, what is the impact? And what you don't want is to try and say, okay, we want to make sure that we've validated every single assumption, so there is essentially 0% chance that anything can go wrong at any time. That suggests that either you're completely delusional, which is often the case, or you have just been so worried about getting everything perfect that you're not building for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, when really you should start building. Now, this depends on your situation. If you're a founder and you're looking to start building something and you have all the time in the world, take your time, because that investment will be hard to get, and that money won't be coming back to you anytime soon. Whereas if you're in a large organization, if you're taking 12 months and you haven't built anything and you've barely got any designs together, and people just think that you're wasting time, and you are costing the business money because you'll have a whole team of people, at least, you'll have a designer, you'll have probably an architect and engineering manager, those kinds of people. They're not cheap. You'll be spending a lot of money and giving back very little in return. So there you do have much more of an impetus to move. But like I said, don't try and build that $2 million rocket ship to Mars. It's not going to happen.
Sure. That's a great advice for people who are interested in building that rocket, because you have kind of jumped onto a project where we'll spend a lot, and that lot is not sufficient to actually kind of build that particular product. And after that, you will be bankrupt, and you don't know what to do after that, whom to convince, and you'll be sending a lot of people home jobless probably, which is not a good idea. Yeah. Okay. So I think people should be cognizant of what they are, where they're heading here, basically. Okay.
Definitely.
Interesting. So Jehan, one of the concerns with finding product market fit is you will be sharing your idea with a lot of people, right? Whom you are interviewing, and let's say clients, or let's say competitors. In a way, you will also be sharing let's say you have a good idea to create a product, you will be sharing that idea with many people, right? And since you're sharing that idea can also get stolen, right? Because ideas do get stolen, right? Oftentimes. How do you think what can founders do with this particular concern, that if they share this idea with certain people and this idea may get stolen, then they may not be the first one to create the product out of that idea, right? So what can they do about it?
I mean, I'd think about it as there are a finite number of people who will have the means to act on that idea, and how much of that idea will they actually understand from you? Because if your idea is something you can describe in a super quick elevator pitch and that's it, and there's nothing else, the rest is vaporware, it's not much of an idea. I mean, it's worth exploring. But I mean, that at that level, I think there is a very low likelihood that it could really be acted on. Because when I think about the features I've built and the projects I've been a part of, there is just so much knowledge you have to have to build it the right way and to understand the technology and how you're handling all those problems. There's just a lot of nuances. So, and to understand exactly what the value is and what you're solving, because if you describe the product to someone, you may not describe the problem exactly. You described it roughly, but the kinds of things that people may not know, like for example, I talk about leadership development. Like the research I did there found that it was early career leaders that needed low cost leadership training. So we went for releasing courses to small groups, not too small that it wasn't profitable, not so big that people didn't get value from it. And we could, give them these 2-day courses that were really well received. Now, I was working at Melbourne Uni. We had a brand. So unless this went to other universities, they won't be able to act on it. They'd also need to be actively looking to work in the space. There already were some competitors anyway. So I guess it just depends. So yeah, maybe if you're flying around in like in the tech billionaire circuit, talking to your Sam Altmans and Elon Musks and people like that, they can just kind of make stuff happen and get funding. And you have an idea that would be super valuable for their business and would massively conflict with them, and you're ready to do it, and you have like a proposal, and you probably don't give that to them. Don't give them the full spec. But generally speaking, what I'm trying to say here is I don't think there's any real risk. I don't think when people have an idea, when they say, hey, I have this idea, like what if we made it that we have like a Bitbucket for Word so you can do collaborative editing together. It's like, cool. I mean, we've already got kind of version control on Word 365. It's probably not that great an idea. It's very rare that they find genie in a bottle or lightning in a bottle. Sorry, that's just that good.
Sure.
And
Understood.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair point, because even if someone kind of gets an inkling about your idea, he will not have the complete picture, like how you want to implement it, what's the value that you are going to add. Maybe he will get a rough sketch, and there are chance that somebody, just because he kind of heard the idea, he will actually end up creating a product. It's very rare. So this fear is actually overblown. I mean, there is nothing much to worry here about. Generally speaking, of course, there can be a case where the idea itself is, let's say, $1 million idea. But generally, people don't need to worry that much, and they can kind of do the product market fit exploration. They can do all the talking without kind of worrying about it much.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And
So
actually, one last thing to add, sorry, just on that is the benefit you get with talking to people about it is you get feedback, and that feedback is a thing that will take your $10, $100, or $1,000 idea and potentially turn into $1 million idea. I mean, the amount of you'll never get it right the first time, and it's by talking to people who have that problem that you learn. And even talking to competitors, you probably learn more because they'll probably be just interested in what you're doing, unless it's literally going to put them out of a job. So yeah, I'd say definitely, probably don't worry about it. Anyway, sorry, continue.
sure, understood. Okay, so another question that I had, Jehan, is like, traditionally, what we used to observe is like big enterprises who have a lot of resources, a lot of money. What they used to do is, particularly when they were trying to work on, let's say, hardware-related products or music-related products, right? Or let's say in medical science, they used to employ these focus groups, right, where they will bring specialists from all the domains, and then they will connect with them, and then they will throw this problem at them, kind of take all their suggestions, and then they will try to gauge the product market fit based on the discretion of these experts. Okay, what these experts have said, based on those that knowledge, they will try to determine if there is a product market fit, and if they say, all the experts say yes, then they will go ahead and create a product, right? Do you think that approach is still valid in today's time, or probably the best way is to go to the customers itself?
Look, I think there's a few things at play there that I find challenging. Probably two things. So there's nothing horrible about that. Talking to customers, having a focus group, it's fine. Like, you're going to learn a lot. It's useful. But the two problems I find is, one, when you talk to people in a group, if you've got 10 experts in a room and you get an hour of their time and you choose to use that all at the same time, like, you've just had a very expensive 1 hour, and you can't have them all talk at the same time. So, you're going to be, unless you like have separate booths and just run them all separately, in which case it's not a focus group, you're not going to get the the best feedback. And in some cases, you'll get groupthink. You'll get maybe 3 people with really strong opinions, and then the other 7 might all disagree, but they might just feel a bit self-conscious and worry that people will think they're stupid if they say what they actually think. So I definitely would find that to be a problem. The other thing I find is just the idea of kind of running these monolithic sessions where, like, I see it with, I mean, you could see it with the focus group example, but I see it more with, running research. If you have like a user research team, those teams are great, but sometimes I see people trying to do a research project. And this is probably not so much the researchers, it's really more the rest of the business expecting this research to kind of teach them everything. It's like, hey, I've got like 1,000 questions in this 1 or 2 month research project. Could you like answer every single one of them and then come back with this like report that is essentially the Bible for how to do our product forever? That's just unrealistic. So I much prefer the ability to just have an ongoing relationship with some customers, talk to new people all the time. And what I'm really talking about here is continuous discovery. And Teresa Torres is a great book on this. It's all about, can you just keep talking to customers? Because what you find initially, every starts the same. People say, oh, people these days when you're doing B2B, they're time poor and they want simpler, easier to use applications. And it's just always like, oh, of course, where is that not the case? Then they get into, okay, but for this stuff, they need these use cases, these things are important. It's like, okay, but then next level of detail, tell me then exactly how this should look. What are the things it needs to solve? When those things are missing, that's where I find people building stuff that no one uses, because they build something that ostensibly solves the problem, but then they miss all the other requirements. The devil is in the detail. That's kind of how a product works. So, I'm a bigger fan of keep engaging with customers. Try and find people who you have a good rapport with, who are willing to have an ongoing relationship with you. You might have to pay them for it, but it's still going to be cheaper than a focus group.
Because what I understood is focus groups can be useful, but oftentimes there is this possibility that if there are 10 people in the room, first of all, getting that focus group will be costly because a specialist will take a lot of money. And then if there are 5 people who are kind of biasing towards a certain idea, other 5 people may not, they may be reluctant to give an idea which is kind of contradictory to that idea because of all the psychological tension that may build up in that particular focus group. So there can be bias in that particular approach. Also, you lose the fact that you cannot have a continuous communication. You got an idea, but if you are in contact with, let's say, customers or customer groups, whenever, even during the phase of development or during the phase of refinement of that idea, you can go back to them and say, hey, this is what we thought you would like, and they can give more feedback and you can refine your product even more. Whereas focus groups is more like one-time thing, so you will lose that relationship. And so in the long run, probably you will be stuck again because you don't know where to go once you have, well, let's say, even if you have created a product, but what next? That next question cannot be answered by focus group. You cannot keep running behind focus groups all the time, so you will have to go to customers anyway. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So Jehan, tell me one thing. What role do you think can emerging technologies like AI play in assessing the product market fit?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think AI, so there's, first of all, just the ability to run research. Because running research, like when I joined Atlassian, in my first couple of years, I spoke to about 100 customers. I think it was the first year I spoke to about 100, and I've spoken to a few hundred more since then. And it's a lot of time. You kind of want to do a bit of research first, decide what you want to talk about. And there's a lot of follow up afterwards. You take notes, and then you realize you just got a mess of notes that you can't really read through anymore because they only made sense at the time you wrote them. So I definitely see AI being really, really helpful with being able to save interviews, get the transcript, get a summary, and create like a corpus that you can then query and ask. And I'm looking for that to get better over time, because I think what AI is good as a raw kind of technology is, the LLM with the transformer architecture, being able to kind of summarize text, things like that. But what we haven't really figured out is how to build a database for that to query, like the kind of RAG side of it, where you say, all right, how can we say, I've done 100 customer interviews. I want to be able to get charts that say, okay, of the 100, what proportion did this, what proportion did that? Can we segment and cluster these in different ways? Can we tag each of these interviews so we can then just get some descriptive statistics out of it? that kind of thing. So I can see there's a huge role there, first of all. And then there also could be other things like maybe using AI to talk to some customers or to engage or even just to do the booking of interviews so you can just jump in. And even having an AI moderator help, even if they don't have to talk, they could be, just suggesting questions. They could be looking back at previous conversations to prompt on what you should be talking about. So I think anything you can do to just take the onus of remembering everything that was said and all the notes you took and just booking things and doing all the calendar stuff. A lot of that stuff isn't even AI, but having an AI agent being able to like take actions for you, that stuff there, a simple use case, really massively powerful. Those are the main things. I think after that, the whole thing of you crafting, you having the expertise, like at the end of discovery, you need someone who understands the problem really well, understands what the solution is going to look like and all the things about how it's going to look like and why, understands tech and why, how you're going to build it and how long it's going to take, roughly speaking, and where you have high and low confidence. And this is split across PM, design, and eng, and you can mix that up however you want. I definitely, in some cases, will speak more to the eng side. Other times, I have engineers speaking more to the PM side. That's all fine, but you can't AI away that, I find, because ultimately, people in the business want to see someone that they can say, all right, we're going to ask you 20 difficult questions. And if you can answer them all, we'll just assume that the other 80 questions that we haven't thought of yet are probably fine. So we trust you. Because ultimately, yes, product market fit is subjective, or it's only realized later. It's an assertion. You're basically saying, we think this is a viable route for us to go down. And you can't, people in a business need people they can trust. So, say, yes, this is going to work and here's why. And there's part of that showing the reasoning, but the other part of it's just showing that you've done a lot of work and you have every reason to believe in yourself.
What I understand is like AI can do some supplementary work where you can help you in kind of recording the conversations, creating notes of them, making them searchable. And also at times it can do roles like, moderating a couple of discussions and all those things. But probably that's all that it can do because the nature of this topic, it is pretty subjective and someone has to be accountable for that. So if eventually, let's say there is a person who has to give this, thumbs up that yes, the product market fit has been found, and he will have to be kind of sufficiently sure that he is using correct judgment. When AI is in the picture, you cannot really get that confidence, and that will be a problem. So yeah, that's an interesting point. I think AI can be used as an assistant here, but that's all. Probably this is not the place to use AI when you're doing product market fit, and you would want someone who is more accountable.
I mean,
Okay,
it's a productivity tool across the board. I mean,
right,
it'll help you with the interviews and stuff like that. It'll help you with
right,
coding for doing any analytics you need to do. You can also use it to just get an understanding of just, okay, tell me about this area, given what you have inferred from your, 1.75 trillion parameter model or however big it is now, or find some articles and summarize and bring them to me. You can use it to kind of speed up that desktop research process as well. You can use it along the way, but it's ultimately a productivity tool. Because the problem with AI is you say, oh, can you tell me all about this? And then they give you all this stuff. And you're like, okay, cool. But now I still have to read it. Like AI doesn't just connect into your brain. And one of the things I think people don't understand people often, one of the problems with AI and the way we think about it is we often anthropomorphize. I mean, AI it's a prediction machine. It's a next token generator. It's just got such a massive architecture, especially with, embeddings and transformers, that basically it's conditional probability on steroids where, if you say the capital of the capital of Texas is blah, it will come up with the right answer because it has inferred that from all the text in the internet, and it knows that probabilistically speaking, that this is the most likely answer. What I mean to say by that is when you ask it questions, it doesn't give you answers you've thought about them. So if you ask him, is this a good idea? Should we invest here? It'll say yes. And then you say, but isn't this better? And it might say yes. And they say, but isn't that better? I say, yes. Like it's not there to be consistent. It's not a thinking entity. so you can use it to make sense of the world. But yeah, don't. There's no person sitting there that's conscious and waking up that's going to do
True.
your job for you anytime yet.
That's very interesting. Okay, so Jahan, let's say I think the last logical question would be, let's say a founder realized that the product market fit does not exist. That after all the exploration he did, right, he realized that the product which he's trying to create, and on which let's say he has made some small investments also, and the market still is not ready for accepting that product. In that case, what should be the next logical step for the founders?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, when you're looking initially, when you talk about, we have this idea, I guess it depends on what level of granularity. If you say, we believe there is something we can do for legal secretaries in the legal services sector, particularly in these countries, that's nicely defined, because you're not just saying, we think there's something we can do with technology somewhere for someone on planet Earth. That's obviously too broad. And you're not also saying, we are specifically going to build, this AI chatbot for legal teams that will do their admin tasks for them, specifically like this with these technologies. Like, it's not like a full-blown solution. If you have something like that, I think you're probably unlikely to just find that there's nothing you can do there for anyone, even whether it's there or even adjacent. Because what you might do when you talk to when you go talk to lawyers, you might find that the paperwork is a big problem, but they don't mind, because ultimately it's all just compliance stuff, and you actually couldn't solve the problem with technology because it needs to be paper, otherwise they will go to prison, kind of thing. But then what they might tell you is, what they struggle with is, some other problem, which might be like taking notes, or doing discovery, or like synthesizing things in other places. Or maybe you find something adjacent where they say, oh, my clients struggle to find the right lawyers. We get calls from people who call us, but they shouldn't be calling us, because we don't even do that. But everyone thinks the lawyer's a lawyer, but there's family law, there's this law, there's that law. So what you might be able to do instead, and actually have an acquaintance who is trying to do this, you might actually say, okay, what's better is, we can solve this group of people who are looking to find the appropriate legal support. So I think if you're open-minded and willing to pivot, you should be fine. The problem then would be, if you just jump in and you start building a thing, but you haven't validated that the problem exists. And if you're doing that, you're kind of getting what, in my mind, you're kind of asking for, which is, you should be validating that the problem actually matters. And you can do that really quickly. I think that's what people don't understand. Like, I have relationships with customers, so sometimes people say, oh, we should go do some customer research, we can run some interviews. I'm like, I can also just send a message to these 5 people and I'll hear from them overnight, and then tomorrow we can resolve this conversation. You could do something similar here. You might take a little longer to find people, but you might be able to find 5 people in a week. And after that, you might find that, no, they don't care about your product, I think it sucks. Or yes, they love it, but then you talk to an engineer and then you realize it's actually going to be incredibly difficult to build. And there's 5 people out there that have heaps of money that have already built this, and that people aren't even buying it because it's too expensive. So like, I think you shouldn't have, if that's happened to you, you've gone too far. You've messed up discovery, in my mind.
Okay, so I think the message is loud and clear. Look before you leave. Kind of before you start development, start kind of putting too much money. It's a good idea to find out the market fit and start slow. So you don't have to be very aggressive, but you can definitely start talking to customers. If you already have customers, nothing better than that. If you can just message them, hey, I'm thinking of working on this feature, and if you have good relationship with customers, definitely they will come and kind of help you. It also, I think, brings the side point that always have good relationship with your customers, have people engaged with the customers all the time, because they not only help you kind of generate your revenue, but they also help you build better products, greater products, and by providing continuous feedback. That's interesting. I think at this point, I would like to ask all the viewers here, like, if you have ever had this exercise of finding this product market fit, do mention like, how did you go ahead with this? What was the product you were trying to sell or find a market for? And what was the eventual result? Did you find a market for that product, or you realized that probably this product is too early and market does not exist? So on that note, Jehan, it was a great conversation. Thank you for joining. giving your all these very good insights. I think people who are in the early stages in startups, right, they are often worried about developing something which will not sell. They should take note of the advices that you have given. Probably kind of in whichever stage they are. If they're in very early stage, probably they have even better chances of kind of not making the mistake. If it's a
Yeah.
big enterprise, then they should start kind of talking to customers before developing the product. And all the strategies that you have discussed, I think they will be definitely helpful to them. Any last words, Jehan? And post that, I think we can wrap up this call.
No, I think the main thing is just to set expectations. I think what people have to understand is it's just it's a messy process. You go through and you talk to customers, and then you find the problem, but then you talk to people and they don't get it. They don't think that that's a problem because you're in the conversation, but they weren't. So that one thing is just always make sure you bring people to the conversation so they can at least help convince other people, and it's not just your word. Then after that, you might find solutions, and then you think through all the edge cases, you come up with an idea, and then someone has some other ideas, and there's a billion ways you could do it. And I think what I want to come at is, yes, there's a few things when it comes to bringing the right people on board and being really aware of all the stakeholders and people you're working with. Even if you're the boss, you still will have people that you can't, unless you're running a slave factory, which you probably shouldn't be doing. You probably want to have them on side as well. So bringing the right people is really important. But then the last thing is that, yes, ultimately at the very end, it starts off scientific, but it becomes increasingly less scientific until at the very end, it's just kind of a human psychology thing of just people needing to trust it. And
Right.
if you're working in an organization, I'd say definitely do all the things I've described, but also understand that this doesn't mean that you don't leap. You will look before you leap, as you said. I thought it was a really, really good thing to point out. But that doesn't mean you're not leaping. And being able to project confidence, being able to come in and think about the psychological side of, and what people might be looking for to help them make a decision, especially people like investors or leadership, where they don't want to understand every little bit of it. They don't want you to basically dump the discovery on them so they can then see everything. They want to be able to just trust you. So maybe the last thing would be don't underestimate the messiness of just human psychology and people. That just adds a whole other dimension to this. And if you're doing this and you're struggling and you think that you're just terrible at it and you go, wow, that guy made it sound so easy, why am I so bad at this? You're probably doing a good job. You're probably going to do a good job. It's just hard work. That's all.
Sure. I think that's a very good motivation for people who are working on this problem because, as Jehan mentioned, right, finding a product market fit is not easy problem. It's a massive process. Otherwise, we would have had so many good products, right, all the time. The reason why only certain products make it big and become very successful is because the product market fit is not easy to find, and you will, as he said, there is a psychological element involved here. There is a gut feeling involved here. There is a market realities that even after doing all the exploration, you may miss on those realities. You may kind of they may not be any process is never complete, right? So
Oh, yeah.
after doing all this exploration, also you may have some surprises. But anyway, trying is better. And thank you, Jehan, for joining on this session. It was a great conversation.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me. It's been good fun.
Sure. All the viewers, please do subscribe. We are having some very good conversations lined up, and hope all of you are having good time watching these podcasts. Please provide your feedback, provide your comments more actively. If there are any topics that are in your mind that you would like to be discussed in this podcast, do let me know. I will kind of try to bring experts in that particular area. With that note, all of you, please have a good day. Thank you for watching.